My name is Morgan Young. I am interviewing Senator Mae Yih for the Oregon State Capitol Foundation Oral History Project. It is October 16th, 2024, and we are in Albany, Oregon. Good afternoon, Senator Yih. Thank you for being here with us.
My pleasure.
I want to start with you telling us about your early life and growing up in Shanghai.
I grew up in Shanghai, China, and I lived a very sheltered and privileged life. The interesting part about my childhood was that I lived within the midst of two wars, one between Japan and China, and one the Second World War. I witnessed the bitter actions during the war and the dictatorship after the war. During the dictatorship, there were tremendous poverty in the city. There were a very small number of wealthy citizens, almost no middle class, and an overwhelmingly large number of people living in deep poverty. People in the countryside were living in mud huts with straw top roof. People in the city, there were beggars in every block. There were corpses of homeless who couldn't afford burial, were wrapped in straw mats and frozen along the roadside. I witnessed these corruption, high inflation. These background helped me appreciate democracy in America. Understanding dictatorship means love of democracy for me.
When did you first come to the United States?
Well, I came in January 1948 on an presidential ocean liner. It took us 2 weeks to get to San Francisco with stops in Tokyo and Hawaii. When the ship got to Hawaii, they changed all into white uniform. It was very impressive. It was a long trip, but it was a lot of fun.
And then you went to Barnard College, correct, in New York?
Yes, I went to Barnard College. Barnard was very strict. It required 2 years of foreign language and a 3-day comprehensive examination on all the major related subjects for 3 days as graduation requirement. But I really appreciate Barnard College president at that time, Millicent McIntosh, talked to us every week during student assembly. Use your education, be involved in the decision-making process for the benefit of your community. She said that to us every week during student assembly. After 2.5 years, it made a very deep impression in me.
Did you meet your husband in New York?
I met my husband at that time. We had tea dances every Friday, and all the students, all the male students at Columbia University or nearby came over for the tea dance. They get free refreshment, free girls to dance with. But at the end, it really wasn't. Uh, it really was. It was not inexpensive for them because they married them. But I enjoy the time at Barnard very much.
So you married your husband, and then you moved to Oregon, right?
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about what brought you to Oregon across the country.
Well, my husband did some research work in titanium in Nevada, and titanium was a sister metal of zirconium, and he was assigned to come to Albany to build a new plant to produce zirconium in response to U.S. Navy's need to build nuclear power submarine. And zirconium is a metal needed to produce nuclear power. And the U.S. Bureau of Mines in Albany has done research in producing zirconium. And that's the reason we came to build a new plant in zirconium for Wah Chang, who is answering to U.S. Navy's need to produce zirconium.
So tell me what it was like moving to a more rural setting like Albany, Oregon, compared to living in New York City or Shanghai.
Well, it's beautiful to live in the countryside, to look out into green field, beautiful scenery. But there are perils living in the countryside for ignorant city folks. We made a mistake of trying to catch a little kitty with a white stripe on her back as a pet for our son to play with. Boy, were we shocked to get the terrible odor it released. I screamed and yelled, and I ran around the house to open all the windows. I was totally shocked, and we received no sympathy from our friends about our mistake either. They say, "You don't know what a skunk looks like?" And we've never seen a skunk in the city. But it was beautiful living in the countryside.
Let's talk about your public service. Did you first get involved in public service through your son's school?
Yes. The inspirational message Barnard College talked to us every week made a real impression in me. So when my sons went to elementary school in Albany, I volunteered as a room mother, den mother, hot lunch program coordinator, zoo visit chaperone, PTA vice president, and PTA president. The Democratic Party invited me to run for political office. Oh, I should say there was a vacancy on the school board, and my neighbors encouraged me to run for the school board seat. I continued with my volunteer service, and I won the election to the school board.
And then you were approached by the Democrats?
Yes. And then I was approached by the Democrat Party chairman, to run for the legislature because as a school board member, I was always demanding high quality performance and very prudent with spending of tax dollars. I think my knowledge of economics in Barnard College and accounting in graduate school of business helped me make very responsible public policy and difficult financial decisions, especially during inflation and depression times.
So, can you talk a little bit about your campaign when you first ran for the House legislature?
Well, I campaigned by going door to door, and very few candidates would spend time going door to door, and people were very pleased about my visit, and I took notes about what they said and followed up with prompt response answering their concerns.
So overall in the Oregon legislature, you served for 26 years.
Yes.
And you earned a reputation as a tireless and effective advocate for your constituents. What were some of the concerns or issues that were most important to your constituents?
High property taxes was a top concern. There was a legislative bill draft that prevented residents of Lane County and Deschutes County from receiving property tax relief. I was able to make a correction in that legislative bill draft and reduce property taxes permanently for Lane County and Deschutes County residents. That correction made over the last 25 years $125 million savings for Lane County and Deschutes County taxpayers at $5 million a year.
Do you remember what it was like being a freshman or some of your early experiences working in the state capitol?
There was a lot to learn as a freshman. Trying to listen to and working with them is a big part of legislative success. However, you still need to stay fast to your principles because party pressure was always very strong. I was able to stay fast with my principles of living within our income without tax increase, set priorities, take out waste and duplication, same as families and business do. Most of them all wanted to increase taxes when the revenue is not low, but we need to stay within our income without increase in taxes, set priorities, eliminate waste and duplication, and live within our income same as families and businesses do.
I'd like to learn a little bit more about your experiences being a member of the House, the Oregon House. Which committees did you serve on, and what was some of the work you did?
Well, I served on the Education Committee during my freshman year. And in the second term, I served on the Trade and Economic Development Committee. While the Democrats held majority in the House, but I was more conservative than most of the Democrats representing Portland. So my time in the House was occasionally challenging.
Then in 1982, you decided to run for a seat in the Oregon Senate. So what led you to that decision? And do you have any?
Well, there was a vacancy in the Senate. John Powell, who was a senator, decided not to run for a third term. I had a very strong opponent for the seat. She was an attorney, chair of the State Lawyers Association. She was from a third-generation farm family. She challenged me to debates. I continued with my door-to-door campaign and won the election.
What are some of the similarities and some of the differences between serving in the House versus the Senate?
The similarity is that we serve the same population, except the Senate district has twice as many population. Senate district has two houses, two House districts. The term of office is also different. In the Senate, there are 4-year terms, and in the House, it is a 2-year term. There are 30 senators in the Senate and 60 representatives in the House. In the Senate, we can get along, we get to know the senators better because they're lesser people. One of my good political friends in the Senate is the former Senate President Gene Doerfler, a Republican, but he needs my votes for his priority bills quite often. That's why we were good political friends.
You were also elected Senate President pro tem for the 1993-1995 session. So explain to me a little bit what that position involves.
I act as temporary Senate President during his absence.
Great. So now we're going to talk a little bit about some bills you sponsored or co-sponsored. So should we start with the Willamette River scientific study?
I saw the need for the safe use and protection of the river as population and industries increase along the river. I sponsor a scientific study of the Willamette River to examine its contamination and its sources. State funding was obtained that was matched by private industries, municipal and federal governments. The Willamette River was the largest river in Oregon, and it floats along 70% of the population in Oregon. It is very important to protect and safe use of the river. The study was continued under Governor's Advisory Committee after 1997. Mm-hmm.
What about the bill on enterprise zones?
I introduced the enterprise zone to help employers make investment in economically lagging area with property tax exemption for 3 years and local government regulatory relief, increasing employment by about 10% after introduction of this bill. Oregon was in a serious recession in the 1980s. This bill helps to create much needed jobs.
The birth certificate bill?
This is a very interesting bill. It means changing the data on a person's birth certificate after application to the court. So the data on the sex can be changed after a person changes his or her sex through medical, physical operations. And the bill passed without any difficulty. And the newspaper in San Francisco rated me as top legislator of the year after passage of the bill. San Francisco, they must have a lot of need for this bill. I want to tell you, when a citizen, a woman citizen, called me and said she wanted a change on her birth certificate. And I said to myself, that should not be any problem. Probably it means a person was adopted and the name was changed. So I said to her, no problem. So I have the Legislative Council propose a bill, and when the bill was heard by the committee, I asked her to come and testify. And she came, a lady with tall hairdo and tall high heels, and we were followed by a fleet of TV reporters, media reporters, a long list of followers to the committee. And the committee chairman said to me, Representative Yih, no need to testify. We support this bill. So it went to the Senate. Senate committee chairman said, no need to testify. We support the bill. See, I didn't know it was a change of sex. All the time, I thought it was a change of name. So finally, the senator in the Senate said, this is a good bill, do pass. If you have any questions, please contact Representative Yih. And the bill passed without any trouble. And then I realized it was a change of sex. That's why I had so much attention and nobody wanted to talk about it. But it passed without any trouble. But it was a big surprise to me.
Could you tell me about the covered bridges bill?
Yes, I was invited to speak at a rally about saving covered bridges. I did some research and realized that in 1937, we had 500 bridges. And by 1987, we only had 47 bridges remaining. We lost 250 bridges in 50 years, 5 bridges a year. And I set aside 500,000 lottery funds each biennium for 2 biennium. I set up an advisory committee to require county matching funds for the restoration and preservation of the historic covered bridges. The declining covered bridges was due to lack of funds for maintenance and preservation. That's why the bill requires annual examination and maintenance and matching county funds. Most of the bridges were under the jurisdiction of the counties, require them to come up with matching funds to the examination and restoration of the historic covered bridges.
It's quite a variety of things, of bills you've sponsored.
Oh, I sponsor a lot of bills, but they were all due to citizens' requests. I don't come up with new legislation. This is always due to citizens' requests.
You were also instrumental in strengthening and increasing trade between Oregon and China, as well as establishing the sister state relationship that we have. Could you talk to me about your work in China, as well as what you've observed during the multiple trips you've made there?
I'm very proud of my Chinese heritage, and by the fact that I was the first Chinese American to be elected to the state legislature in America. I'm also very proud to have played a role in opening and strengthening trade relations with China. It is very important to build friendly relationship which help to increase trust, trade, prosperity, and world peace. I personally have contributed scholarships for Chinese students to come to Oregon State University to learn about environmental protection and agricultural and forestry production and management. Because of our geographic proximity to China, their huge population, and our similar interests in the agricultural and forestry economy, there are enormous potential in trade with China and its mutual benefits. During our last trip to China, in 2002, we met with the Vice Premier of China in Beijing. He was very interested in getting our help to reclaim the desert land in China, to build a green belt of forests and pasture land across the country, to help with the expansion of desert. The green belt, we're talking about 5 million hectares, about 12 million acres, about 2.47 acres equivalent to 1 hectare. So we're talking about huge acreage of reclaiming desert land. China needs to improve their expansion, need to contain the expansion of desert. We were told that Beijing faced 12 dust storms in the previous spring, when such dust storms only occur 2 or 3 times during a 10-year period in the 1970s. They are very desperate in helping to reclaim the desert land across the country. because our similar interests in agriculture and forestry industries, we can give them a lot of help. Oregon is the world's largest producer of grass seed and high in quality. They are high in purity and high in quick regrowth of the seeds. So there are a lot of work we can do together to help them. My observation is that we can discuss a lot of improvement when we met with the leaders, but we need to be persistent in follow-up meetings to talk about improvement, talk about pilot projects, and discuss research we can do for them. As an example, the drought-tolerant varieties of trees and grasses. But there are tremendous potential we can do to help them with mutual benefits.
You decided not to seek re-election in 2002. Can you talk to me about that decision?
Well, my husband was in poor health, and I decided I need to stay home and take care of him. And at age 74, I decided it's time to retire and spend more time with family.
And what have you been working on since you retired from public service?
Since I retired, I wrote 2 books, and
Here's one of them.
yes, one on my husband about the hardship he endured during the time he had to work to support, to pay for his tuition, his living expenses while going to school at the same time. He said sometimes when he couldn't afford the 10 cents for Subway, he had to walk more than 100 blocks to go to school. And in order to survive, he lived on 2 hot dogs a day. But he was successful in completing his graduate work. So I wrote a book about his hardship and his pioneer work in producing zirconium. The Navy gave him 6 months to build the plant to produce zirconium. He built it in 4 months. He worked day and night at the plant. I never saw him. He was at the plant all the time, but he was able to build the plant and produce zirconium in 4 months, even with the rainy weather. I wrote my book on my life and career in China and America to tell them the importance of what Millicent McIntosh told us. Use your education. Be involved in the decision-making process for the benefit of the community. America is a land of freedom and great opportunities. If you set your mind to it, only sky is the limit.
Wonderful. Well, those are the questions I had. Is there anything else you want to make sure we talk about?
Let me see. I told you the interesting story. I always carry grass seeds with me in little packets, and fast-growing tree seeds in little packets. And I gave them out as samples to the leaders whenever I met them. And one of the fast-growing tree seeds farmer told me, when you give them, when they plant the fast-growing tree seeds, jump back. That means how fast the tree seeds will grow. He said, be sure to tell them, when they plant, jump back. I thought, and that was pretty funny.
Yeah.
I carry grass seeds with me all the time. My clothes were all full of grass seeds.
You always had a bit of Oregon with you. Well, thank you so much for chatting with us this afternoon. We really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. It's fun.